Greetings, Marsh, and welcome to episode 29 of my Pyanodon's playthrough. In this episode, we are going to start casting plates, which is going to be an incredible increase to the output and efficiency of our plate production. Enjoy! We can do casting, which unlocks the casting unit, the best way to make metal plates. Another building that requires gas furnaces and also other random things like a local radar. But yes, we are about to create an incredible amount of plates. And we finally have a new use of creosote that if we mix it with sand, we get sand castings. So we'll do that. And another component of iron processing that we haven't researched yet because we couldn't do anything with it is boron. So this works by first mining borax out of the ground, and then we wash it and we get borax and muddy sludge. And that borax is essentially what we need to help purify other minerals. And if we mix borax and hydrogen, we get diborane, which gets added to water to create boric acid. And then we add coke to that to get boron trioxide, which is something we're going to need later. And finally, we have iron processing, stage 1, because we technically haven't gotten stage 1 of iron processing yet, although this is the second upgrade to iron, that if we take borax and processed iron ore and add oxygen and send it through the oxygen furnace, which means burning a whole bunch of fuel, we can turn it into molten iron. And then that molten iron can be mixed with borax and a sand casting to create an absolutely enormous amount of plates. And if this is your first time seeing Pi, you're probably going to be shocked at what an upgrade this is compared to what we're doing before. And also there's a hot air version that makes it go from 60 to 75 without increasing the input requirements. And of course, that's worth it. So we'll hit that. And iron is still short, but what can you do? We are trying to fix it. So to do this, we're going to need some borax, and it's not a difficult thing to create, so you probably just want to pick whatever's closest, and luckily there is borax right here and our iron mine is there, so it's actually not going to have to go very far, which is great. And it's barely within our radar, but we can see it. And note that this is something else that requires syngas to mine. So let's calculate for borax, but all we have to do is wash it in a bunch of washers. And really, it's not going to take that much syngas compared to how much we are using for other things. It's a pretty straightforward build. You can see that power needs are increasing. Of course, those electrolyzers like to kick in, but electric mining drills aren't the crazy power hog that they used to be. So here's our patch, 27 million. And kind of like with the flora, just look at where the green squares are, and that is in the middle of the tile that the mines are touching. And these do have connection pipes on 3 sides for the mining fluid. And we might as well fill up the whole patch. And we do need a reasonable amount of it, but not like a crazy amount, so we might as well just max out the patch. We have the resources for it at this point. Despite using the syngas, they are of course still an electric building and need their power poles. Okay, let's hook it up, make some borax. Looking good, it's very fast. Now this is going to be a very far distance to send the muddy sludge, but considering our storage tank of it is actually empty, I kind of feel like we need to. But the washing of it is really simple. The power poles do reach the size of these buildings, so that always makes it nice and convenient. I kind of want to put the pipes on the top part just so we can see them, because the bottom is a little blocked. And it's a 1-to-1 for everything, so for every piece of borax that goes in, you get a clean one on the way out. So in goes the water. Let's combine the 2 sides. Looking good. And I do like how the icon kind of changes a little bit. And it's actually quite varied, where you have big chunks of it and little bits. Well, we've got some good news that a lot of our guts are starting to decay into jerky. So everything is starting to catch up again, and I suppose I'll just let this keep going. Because we had a jerky shortage, we don't want that to happen again. So let's take a look at these iron plates. There's a couple of things to consider. First of all, we can just compare the efficiency with the old build by making the numbers the same. That previously, to make 6 plates, it took 30 ore, and we got 6 stone out of it. Now it only takes 6.67 of the iron and only 1.34 stone. So this is dramatically more efficient. Like, it's not even close. And of course we would want 15 a second, but something else to consider is that the old build was based around 30 ore a second and has 18 processed iron ore. We've already built it. There's no reason to change it or get rid of it. So when it comes to the new build, we might as well make it bigger, and we could basically get 27 plates out of it for the same amount of input and the same amount of buildings. Now, we don't necessarily want to make that much just because we really have nowhere to use it, but this does tell us that nonetheless, we basically can double up production in the future if we need to. So for now, we'll just base it on 15 and we can go from there. There's a couple of things to consider here. We've already taken care of the borax, and we're not going to worry about hot air, but we do need coke, and also the sand. Coke is starting to get a little difficult. Mainly, it's hard to prioritize which setup gets what, because we have our 3 belts of coke here, and we're already earmarking 2 of it to go towards the antimony. We're probably going to need to change how this setup works. So currently the entire tar setup is limited by coke. It runs based on how much coke we need. But instead, I kind of want to treat coke as a byproduct here and limit this whole setup based on certain tank levels. And then we can send the coke towards our power plants, and then it can get distributed as required. It's going to take a lot of belts to do this, but it would be more efficient than how we're doing it now, and also more on demand, because if we go up here to our tanks from tar, well, I guess it's okay now, but for a while we were having trouble making syngas, and we're only making these as a byproduct of the coke from before. So instead, I kind of want these things to turn on and off as they are required. And the logic for these 2 setups was slightly different to prioritize making coal here, but I don't think we really need to do that. So first, let's take this valve out. And this will work like before, that if this level gets below 10%, it'll fill up. But there are some other conditions that we might want to run this for. For example, if we are either low on coal gas or low on syngas, we will want to run this process as well. And it has to go through a different pipe because the logic is different. And we're going to want to have an underflow in here. This will allow the tank to get to, say, 90% at its maximum, but this will not allow it to fill up the tank, because if we completely fill up tar, then all of these, because they create some tar, will not have anywhere to go and it might jam. So this will leave room in the tank. And then we can create an ore condition by having multiple pumps hooked into this, and they just run based on conditions. So what conditions would we want to look at? Well, the status of these 2 tanks, and of course the factory will be a little cleaner if we just put yet another radar right in here. So the 2 conditions are coal gas is critically low or syngas is critically low. So if either of those conditions are true, it will turn on, and it will only fill up the tank to 90%. And hooking up the wire, neither of those are true, so we are not going to get any flow. But what happens if tar gets too full? Well, then the next dump to make tar go away, I mean, we could just burn it, but that seems a little sad. So the efficient way of getting rid of it is to just dump coke. And we are currently burning it all the way over here in a power plant, but I'm thinking of moving it to a different place. But for now, we can leave the logic here. Why else would we want this process to run? Well, if creosote got low, we would want it to go. And that's the, believe it or not, the only unique thing that this setup creates. Even coke isn't the main product anymore. That all of this runs basically for creosote. So creosote and tar are the 2 conditions we care about. But now we need somewhere new to take this coke and to process it. We don't have loaders yet, so doing this cleanly is going to be tricky. I would like to try to save it if possible. Our power plant right now isn't running to store coke, it's running to store coke oven gas, and we probably want it to stay that way. We're going to need to create some belt balancers in here and give priority to the various places coke would go, because we're just going to have a lot of belts of things. And I'm actually thinking we should probably build an additional plant, because when you think about all the things these power plants do, they basically do 4 things that all compete for the same resources. They generate coke, which takes away from power generation. They generate steam, which takes away from power generation. And they generate coke oven gas, which takes away from power generation. So the actual amount of power that these plants creates is only the remainder after everything is removed. So it's actually really hard to say what kind of power output we would get out of one of these plants. And we went through the effort of putting all these belts here, so we already have the infrastructure in place to at least put one more. I don't think two are going to fit here. Certainly not if this is pushing up here. One thing I did do, I said I was going to remove all the plants off screen, and I did. That the only traditional power plant we have left is this one, and that's so it can burn various byproducts that come by, and it turns it into steam and sends it on its way. Otherwise, all of the other old-fashioned plants were removed. You can say the only one that remains isn't really old-fashioned. It was our coal processing build. And it's worth keeping because it only uses 2 belts of input coal, so it is very efficient for what it does, although its power output is rather small. It's still worth keeping. And yeah, it fits in here, barely. So it's time to get building. For me, it takes a little while, but for you, it's basically an instant. Okay, the coal got here. We're just going to use 5 of the belts from our massive coal bus. The belts are available now because the power plants are gone, so we can feed it into this one. And yeah, seems pretty good. Just gonna let it do its thing. It should be hooked up all the same, so the logic should be identical between these 3 setups, but of course we need the input bricks first. And actually one thing you can do is look at the temperature of the coke oven gas to get an idea for what percentage of it you're actually using to make hot air. So if the input temperature is 250 and the output temperature is basically 100, if it's at 228 and the maximum temperature is 250, then it shows you that we're only using a small fraction of the total gas for making hot air, and that's kind of why I have this logic set up instead of just venting the hot air, because we're actually producing way more hot air than we would need, so this just prevents it from running at all. Okay, well, we need to have logic on these now because we want to try to send the coke to useful places rather than just assuming we're going to burn it. Basically, we want to give output priority towards whatever the non-steam related use of the coke is, and anything that isn't used can go through the power plant like normal. Now we need a giant balancer for all this to go into. I'm not too worried about the coke from the tar processing setup. I just want these 3 power plants to essentially create 6 mixed belts of coke, regardless of how many we're actually going to use. Something like that. Hopefully it is correct. So now we need the input of all 6 setups with priority given to go into this build rather than their power plants. Man, making stuff like that is so much easier when you have loaders and balancing warehouses, which is what I typically do for this sort of thing, but right now we get to do some vanilla shenanigans, things like this. And it might have trouble completely loading unless we do some balancers and whatnot in here, but I don't know if that's really going to matter. We'll see. And well, on the other side of this, we will have our outputs. And before we hook that up, we should probably grab, oh, look at that. Everything is running out. Of course, we are rapidly mining our aluminum, so I don't really care what happens to this patch, so having it disappear isn't a terrible thing. But we need to grab our 3 belts of coke now, and we're already grabbing 2 right here. It is going through kind of a tight location though, so perhaps we should go up. We would be able to take advantage of some of these belts up here if we did, but it would be going from one tight location to another, so I'm not sure, but yeah, we probably should go up. And now we need to control it. So there we go, all the signals are connected. They are not turning on because we are not overloaded on anything, because this setup's primary purpose is no longer to generate coke. So where are we going to send all this coke? Well, we don't want it to compete with other things, so it should probably come all the way up here. Luckily, we have many thousands of belts from all of those power plants we removed. It's not a problem. So we'll send them up here, along here, and keep going straight, and then we can at least reuse some of these other belts here. And then we basically want to take the belts and shoot them into the backs of these other power plants in order to try to give them some amount of priority. And it's going through a balancer, so it really shouldn't matter which one it goes through, so we'll do this and say both the input and the output priority is on the side. If we need something more advanced with this, we'll deal with it when we need to. So much belt work for this. Certainly in the future, when we have more logistics options, it will be cleaner than this. But for now, this is what we're going to be dealing with. and we'll have up to 6 belts of output. So right out of the gate, we know we're going to need 2 belts, and we've already got 2 right here. And this is where our previous ones go in, so we'll just set those up. Of course, we'll have lots of empty belts to deal with. Did the coke get here yet? Nope. Almost, though. It's a big factory. Okay, it's here. They'll get sent to each of the 3 plants and attempt to get priority. And it does seem like this other side is getting more priority than this one, but whatever, I'm not too concerned. That is what the balancer is for. So there's a lot of setup going into this, but our factory's coke production and consumption is significantly different now. We really want this to be functional. Loaders are still pretty far away, so it's not something we're gonna get anytime soon. This is kind of weird, taking so much coke away from tar processing and then simply sending it all back, but we're getting to the point now where the logic kind of requires this. And then if we pull out all of this, there we go. It started here, went all the way to the other side of the factory, and now it's back. So that will go to all of the things that it needs to in the bus, but we don't actually need to send it into this power plant anymore. So we can stop it here. But of course we will have more uses for it soon enough, and I have a build that I expect to use a bunch of it, so that's why I'm setting this up now, because I know what's coming. And we do need to pull this power plant out now. I don't really see it being useful for anything else, but I will do that later. Hopefully this is all set up now, and it should work correctly. So first it all goes through the balancer. Sure, seems fine. And that seems fine. Of course, not all these belts are going to be full because it just depends on what output is. So that is the flaw of this power plant, is it's running for the gas, not for the coke. So the coke production is going to be unreliable, and it's just going to be whatever it is. You know, seems fine. We'll have to see how it runs in practice later on. But as you can see, it is pulling out basically every bit of coke that's being made from the power plant and putting it into this, so that seems good. And it's not really going to ever run at full coke production unless we are completely consuming all of the coke oven gas, which means 100% power output for the factory. So if that is not occurring, then this will not be at full power, and that's okay. We just need to keep our expectations realistic for what it is. It does have a huge buffer to fill with all of these belts, so right now it makes it look like our need for coke is a lot higher than it is because empty belts. And here it is, going through the balancer and where it needs to go. Hopefully this works out under higher throughputs. So we need to make some sand castings, and they come from creosote, which is conveniently right here. So this is probably a great location to do this. However, we have some options. We have a new technology for making sand, and that is separation. That will unlock the classifier, select particles in a very fine way. And the sand recipe is to take soil and sort it through a solid separator. Interestingly, it doesn't use the new building, and that will give us sand, coarse fraction, limestone, and biomass. So we'll have to see what the ratio is for all of that, but even if we get less sand per soil, that could create other things that our factory needs. And then we have the classifier recipes, and the way I look at some of these recipes is crushing things down takes them from a big form, like gravel, and turns it into sand. This recipe goes the other direction. So it takes sand and makes it bigger. In other words, 20 sand will turn into 4 gravel and a % of iron oxide and crushed quartz. And then if we create coarse fraction, this will be a way that we can turn it into something that our factory needs, because right now we can't use it. So let's start that research now and see what the numbers would look like with sand. Okay, research is done, and here's our 2 builds. The first one just creates the soil from water and then washes it to make sand, and that requires almost an entire pump's worth of water and 4.5 megawatts. And then if we do it this way, where we sort the soil into sand rather than washing it, it uses a little bit less megawatts, but it uses substantially less water. Not to mention, it will create some free byproducts. I'm not a fan of creating extra byproducts, but that will reduce the energy consumption even more when you think about what those other things bring. So sure, let's build one of these. Right now we only need 0.2 a second, and this is going to be 2 a second. And that should be fine. I imagine our factory is going to go a very long time before this one building is no longer enough. But it is certainly much denser because we don't need anywhere near as much soil. So I would say yes, that's a good recipe. We could actually do direct insertion with the solid separators here. Probably should. It's not really a 1-to-1 ratio, but it would make this whole thing a little simpler. And we're not actually going to belt these things anywhere because they're used in such tiny quantities that this is a perfect job for a caravan. So we'll just put an outpost in here and let it basically fill up all the way. Okay, so we'll start this up here where in goes the dirt to the separators, and there they go. The sand gets sent into the tar processor in order to make our sand casting, and all of the junk gets put on that belt. So yeah, seems pretty good. It's a little rough, but I like this setup. It's pretty narrow. If these two weren't here, this could actually be tiled pretty well and have these belts kind of coming up through the middle, but so far so good. Let's just let it fill up to 30 stacks of sand castings because they're easy enough to make, and this is going to fill up quickly, but we'll deal with that in a bit because we're going to have a second setup that's going to be doing it. And let's see, are we making sand anywhere else? Technically yes, but this has not run in so long. I think it's time to remove it. This was taking tar and turning it into carbon dioxide and or aromatics, but it hasn't run in so long, I think it's pretty safe to remove it. However, we need to upgrade this setup, and luckily concrete is still in here. So if we make the sand this way and move the limestone down and turn the sand into the main product, the numbers should be correct now. And it seems like it. It's creating some output of these other things and almost certainly requiring way less water. So yeah, I am going to build this real quick as well. So I'll be back in a second. Okay, here we are. It is certainly a lot more dense. We need way less dirt. And of course we don't need the washers anymore. And that creates an interesting problem of the muddy sludge is not nearly the byproduct that it once was. Because the logic works with it in place, we might as well leave it, but it is interesting that no more muddy sludge is going to be made here. Okay, let's put the water in and see what happens. So we need annoyingly slightly more than 15 soil a second, so they have to go in both directions, and this side was not hooked up. And the soil is shared with the landfill, so it goes through that machine first, and then creates our slightly more than 15 random items. And it will put the limestone on the side, because when this runs, it can use the limestone to reduce the need for these machines to go. So they get put in, and the two byproducts of this process, the biomass and the coarse fraction, get stored. And it is interesting that this process will create only 2 byproducts as opposed to 3, but this can stay connected again. I just had these in here to clear everything out. But anyway, there we go. Now this is going to store all of the byproducts, and we don't have much stone right now, so there's not much to really see, but it seems to be going pretty well. So now we have 2 more byproducts that we have to deal with. The first one is the biomass, which is pretty easy because we don't need it for anything. But we already have a build here to get rid of biomass, so we might as well collect it all in the same place. Can't imagine we're going to make very much of this stuff, but let's have a bunch of inserters in there just in case. So the other aspect of this is the classifier, which we can use to get rid of the coarse fraction. And this is an interesting building. It looks very strange in there, but it's a very cool building, I think. However, note that it does have the unloading arrow. So there's the recipe. For every 20 coarse fraction, we'll get a bunch of random stuff. And looking at that random stuff, that is exactly what the output is of our antimony build here. So as long as we inject that onto one of the belts that antimony uses, we will know that it will go to the right location in the end. It's one of these 2 belts here, so any of those will work. And if we follow the belt back, this is the point to where the iron oxide is being pulled off, and it is being pulled off of the bottom one, which means this does have to be on the bottom one. And where would we want to put it? I don't know how much I want to crowd it in here, but we only need one of them, so why not just throw it in? So there it is. We'll get one side of the belt super easy, and if we space this like this, that will cause it to go on the near side, which means we only need to worry about the far side. So we need to make sure that all of these outputs have somewhere to go. These two definitely do. However, down here, we also have the limestone. And the factory has different uses of limestone, and we kind of need to decide where do we send it. Because we want to guess what place is going to use the most limestone. Well, we can't really send it here because it would clog this setup up. So this is relying on the fact that it is actually using its own limestone. Certainly our limestone tiles could use a bunch. So this would be an excellent place to dump the limestone. So too would steel, but the problem with steel is it's all direct inserted, so there's not a whole lot we could do with that. And there's other very limited places where we can dump it. So unless we want to have one caravan with a bajillion stops dumping at every single one of these, we might just want to decide which one to pick. And the one that would consume the most would be here. And if it clogs up, that will be a sign that we need more stops. We have 2 caravans we need to run. The first one will start here, store food, fill cargo, and then it's going to need to make all of its stops. First the limestone, and then the biomass, and then the coarse fraction. Luckily, all these things are really close together, so it's pretty easy to do. So it's going to fill up and it can't go anywhere because it needs complete stacks of everything, and this will function as a buffer for that, so as long as one process is creating a known quantity of items, then it won't get clogged over time. That said, it's basically full, so let's send it on its way. First the limestone, and then the biomass, and then the coarse fraction, and finally it picks up its food and starts again. Okay, the other caravan is going to be a little simpler, and we'll see how this works. It doesn't have much to pick up, but we'll just send it on its way anyway, so we have some items to check. Even though we're not making much refined concrete right now, we certainly have a bunch of regular concrete that we've been picking up as the paving of the factory has been continuing, so I have been turning that into refined concrete. So coming over here, we have all of that biomass that made it, and it's actually kind of a lot. And in it goes. We only have the one boiler, so it can only consume it so fast. I kind of want to have more. Let's put it on both sides, and let's use a few boilers there to get rid of any limitations. And yep, it's a terrible fuel, but at least it's going away. And finally, let's classify all of this coarse fraction here, also called wet soil. And yes, it is a very fast building. And yep, we would not expect it to run continuously because it actually needs more than one yellow belt. That's working great. So you can kind of see that even though this is a byproduct, it's actually a good recipe because you get all this free stuff out of it, and it's really hard to turn down all of this. And one thing we're going to discover, it seems crazy, but we've been overloaded on stone and gravel for a while and have to dump it into these setups to just make it go away. But if you look at our new recipe for plates, it's actually going to dramatically reduce the amount of stone and byproducts that are created per plate. And this is going to apply to basically every process we install. So our factory is going from not enough stone to way too much stone, and we have to get rid of it, to not enough stone again. And I love how the factory morphs and changes like that over time. So having this generate extra stone is actually quite valuable. And there we go. It's gone. So that worked great. And our factory is relatively idle now, but it is interesting that occasionally we get huge bursts of power and then it stops. And actually, I bet what this is steam. Now it does say steam engine is requiring it, but I wonder if this is the bursts that are happening for tar processing to occur, and then everything spikes up. So if you look at what actually requires the energy, it's mining drills and high pressure furnaces. In other words, the power plant. So the only thing that's actually spiking is the power plant itself, which implies that the thing that it is creating and is being consumed is steam. And our main steam consumer is the tar setup. So that is probably what's happening. Well, we've been going on little excursions, but it looks like it is time to actually make this setup now. To start with, we'll build it up based on 15, even though we know that we have the ore for more. We do need more electrolyzers, and I'm kind of worried that this wasn't a big enough setup for electrolyzers because they're just going to keep going down and then bump into things. So I think we should put them somewhere else. I wonder if we can fit 2 of them side by side right here. And by 2, I mean 4 of them, so 2 of these builds. One less weird process to deal with, which makes the factory easier to understand, which is always nice. Are we going to be able to put 2 of these in here? Not really. I mean, we could kind of put them up there, but no, I think we just need to move them over to the side here. So let's build a second one of these, and we can overlay the pipes a little bit just to make it a little more dense. So we'll hook it in, consume a huge amount of power. How much power? A lot. So we're above 1 gigawatt now of total power capacity, not our output, but nonetheless. Right now we are consuming 332 megawatts of electrolyzers. It basically makes the rest of the factory look non-existent. And it's also interesting to note that if we take that out, it used to be that these solid separators used up a bunch of power, and now that we're being more efficient, they're barely on the list anymore. Certainly the miners still are, and the high pressure furnaces, but these are the two components of our power generation, so it does make sense. But since we have upgraded our power plants, our power demands look a lot more reasonable now, except for that, but that is unavoidable. The electrolyzers are just huge energy consumers at this point in the factory, but it's holding out. This is going to reduce our need for burnable fuels because it's going to get rid of one of the major consumers of it, the iron gas furnaces. Kind of like I mentioned on the episode with the gas furnaces, that your time for using them is very narrow, and we've basically passed that point because now we have the better way of making plates. So it's up to you on how you want to upgrade things, but I would definitely say no more new gas furnaces. That, of course, if making the plates with the casting machine is available, then do it, but I'm going to leave all of the pre-existing gas furnaces in place until we have a processing upgrade. And I actually want to put a caravan outpost out here for the collection of all of the ash. Main reason being, I don't want to have an ash separator that only picks up less than 1 belt of ash. Not to mention, this area doesn't actually deal with ash byproducts at all. We would have to send them kind of out here. And since ash is such a good thing to be sent via caravan, I feel like that is what we should do. Okay, most things are here. So let's put in the borax and the coke, which gets split to both sides. And then the processed iron comes from these two setups, and they actually produce more than 1 belt, but we don't really need to rebuild this right now, so let's just use what we have. Now we just need the oxygen, and off they go. Achievement unlocked. And here is the casting unit. It is quite small compared to what it can produce. And note that it also has an unloading arrow on it, so you only need to unload for one side of the belt. And I think I would rather this be facing this way. It'll need 7 inserters. Note that this does actually require a tiny bit of borax. Okay, in goes the hot air. All of our sand castings made it, so the only thing that's left is the molten iron. And there we go. It's a pretty cool building. Certainly one thing that's really nice about it is its output. But yeah, it's a full 15 a second out of one building. So that's something you might not have been expecting. It's how a single building fairly early into Pi can suddenly make 15 items a second without even really trying. And that's the end of this episode. On the next one, we're going to extend our plate casting technologies into things like making more aluminum. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later.